Welcome to the Meaningful Revolution podcast, where we talk about people's passions and hope to inspire you to your own. We also answer the question, what if you could just add 1% more meaning to your life every day for the next year? So join us on this Meaningful Revolution. I'm your host, Sean Butner, certified high performance coach, and we have a really great episode for you today, so let's get into it. Today, we are talking with Michael Ceely. He's a licensed psychotherapist and owner of Ceely Counseling out of Berkeley and in Florida right now. He also serves clients in Florida at the Men's Counseling Florida and Wisconsin and Madison Online Therapy. He's really passionate about mental health. He's the founder of the Men's Therapy Directory, a website dedicated to helping men access counseling resources. He's also a former competitive cyclist, and during his cycling career, he had won 2 state titles and twice went to Olympic trials. So aside from his counseling practice, Michael provides mental performance coaching to athletes. So Michael, welcome.
Hi, Sean. Great to be here.
Today, we are going to be talking about athlete mental health and performance. And so I'm really excited to get into this topic with you. So first, could you, is there anything that I missed in the intro that you'd like to add? Or how could you really tell us how you got into athletes' mental health and performance?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. Really excited about your podcast here, and hopefully it can contribute some value. To answer your question, I have been an athlete my whole life, and I got into psychotherapy as a profession, and in doing so, I realized that I really had an ability to work with athletes because, well, that's a lot of my background. And so I got really interested in first in mental performance for athletes, how athletes can take two athletes who've trained exactly the same, similar backgrounds. One in the key moment like chokes and doesn't quite deliver. The other one does. Or certain athletes will be burned out or go into slumps, and others won't. Found it really fascinating and trying to find the reasons why that happens. And then in exploring mental performance, I also got interested in just overall athletes' mental health. So that when athletes, they're not immune to depression or anxiety, and I got fascinated in how that manifests in athletes because athletes can really use their sport to kind of cover up some of those issues. So it's like a positive coping mechanism sometimes for people, but it can also mask some depression, anxiety symptoms that maybe need to be treated. So yeah, my background in athletics, I just love sports, and so that's the population I really enjoy working with.
Oh, right on. So, I'm curious then, was there a particular moment in your life that really set you down this path, or is there a particular time where you noticed it in a client or someone out in the world where it really was like, oh, I really need to like settle in on this?
Yeah, I think we had talked about this, two of us, before. When I was 15, I got sent to therapy by my parents because my parents were getting divorced, and they said go to therapy, and I was pretty reluctant. And thankfully, I had a great therapist. And at that time, I was getting really involved in bicycle racing, just starting to do well, just really enjoying it a lot, doing well. And this guy really helped me with my performance in cycling, and not only that, but also in my overall mental health. So he gave me really like a lot of education about psychology, and really helped me up my game in my sport. He pointed out how I was holding myself back and playing it safe, and he was very direct, very honest, very down to earth, and I really appreciated that style. I think that planted a seed actually for me to kind of follow in his footsteps later on, because it was such a powerful, positive experience, that I got into it as a profession. So that was really the start of it. Was being fortunate enough to be involved with a therapist early on, and yeah, that's kind of the start of the whole journey for me.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
That's awesome. So I'm curious too, like, did you think you were going to be a professional athlete at that time in life and you were pursuing that? Or did you, after that experience, think like, oh, I want to get into therapy and try to meld these worlds?
At the time, I was very much set on becoming a professional athlete.
Okay.
I didn't do so well in high school. I kind of sacrificed that. I traveled a lot and raced a lot. And, maybe in my back of my mind, subconsciously, I'd thought about becoming a psychotherapist later on. But at the time, I was very much set on not going to college and just like really pursuing bicycle racing professionally. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. So, could you maybe talk a little bit about the transformation that you had, and like, so that was the beginning, like the seed of where you started to really get interested in this topic. But what do you hope you can give to other athletes and other folks, that you help through your practice? And maybe
Yeah.
some nuggets that you learned along the way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's the obvious, training from grad school and all that good stuff, life experience. I think also, I've stayed in touch with the bicycle racing scene my whole life. So I've followed some high level athletes, local athletes who have had some mental health issues, mental performance issues. I've seen what works and what doesn't work. And so, what I try to deliver to my clients is just my experience, my own passion for the sport, and it's. I also want to provide them with education too. I think that's really important. Sometimes what's missing, say from counseling or sports psychology, is really educating the client a lot, assigning reading, um, being more transparent about the process. I think that can be really helpful too.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. So I'm just curious then, like, with this education and really helping people along the process, um, have there been any like unexpected opportunities that might have helped you in other areas of your life from studying performance and athletes and mental
Mm.
health?
Oh, certainly, yeah. Yeah, yeah, I would say so. I mean, I run my own business. You do too. So
Yeah.
you know that sometimes there's that negative self-talk that comes up. Say if you're not seeing results, you're putting in the effort, putting in the work, but you're not yet seeing the results. Similar thing can happen with athletes too.
Mm.
So I think I've learned how to control my negative self-talk. I don't try to, stifle it or smother it. I realize it's a natural human reaction that we all have negative self-talk. And so what I do is I catch it as it comes up, have compassion for it actually, and go, okay, I get it. I'm concerned, like I'm interested, I'm passionate, and I kind of give it a reframe. And then I instill the positive thinking as an antidote to that. So everything I've studied in sports and in psychology, I apply it. You can apply it to really anything in your life, to relationships too, right? So if you're mad at your significant other, you can watch the self-talk going on there, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I think it's a lot of just self-awareness, of just being aware of how the human brain is wired. It's wired by default to look for problems and look for negativity.
Hmm.
So that if you're able to observe that phenomenon and understand the purpose for it, it's more of a survival mechanism, and move beyond that. Um, a lot of all that self-awareness comes in handy in times of challenge in your life and really any aspect of your life.
Yeah, totally. And
Yeah.
as a high performance coach, so I deal a lot with mindset. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, maybe with the population of athletes that you work with, and maybe other areas of your life, are there common like phrases of self talk or categories of self talk that aren't so negative that tend to trip people up, or are there ones that people or yeah, we'll start there, and then I have a couple other
Mhm.
follow ups.
So you're asking like categories of negative self-talk, like
Yeah,
degrees of?
so it might be like, I deal recently with a lot of like, I'm too old to change careers, so it's, I'm like, ultimately, it's a feeling of not being enough, and it shows up in age or experience or
Mm.
place they are in life, or,
Right.
you can name it, but it's ultimately like, I don't feel worthy enough to make this change. And so
Right.
we do a lot of work with that. But maybe there's a couple others like that that might.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Aside from giving you more and more examples, I would say breaking that down, what self-talk is, it's a manifestation of a belief.
Okay.
So the belief is first, and then it manifests in self-talk. So you hear the self-talk in your head, and you take that. You don't necessarily question the belief on which it's founded, right?
Mm.
So I work in the style of cognitive behavioral therapy, and what we try to do is get to the root of that, so that you say, okay, one way you could do it is you could just give education around negative self-talk, normalize it, and then counterbalance that with positive self-talk. That certainly works. If you want to get deeper, and this goes maybe more into psychotherapy as opposed to
Mm.
performance coaching,
Yeah.
so you want to be mindful of that. But what I do, at least in my psychotherapy practice, is getting more to the core beliefs, right? So
Okay.
what would you have to believe to say that you're not worthy of this? Or what would you have to believe to fall into the imposter syndrome thing? Or what would this self-talk that you're articulating right now, what would you have to believe to actually say that, right? And sometimes it's really simple. Sometimes it's complex. It gets into family issues. Um, but depending on the need or the goal of the client, right? If the client just
Mhm.
wants to improve performance, you may not have to get into that deep house cleaning, right? You could
Yeah.
just give them some education around negative self-talks, and then give them positive self-talk to replace it. Or depending on the service that you're providing, you could do psychotherapy with your client, and then you drill down into some of those core beliefs. And that usually takes a little more time. So
Mm.
oftentimes athletes they'll have a competition coming up, like, hey, I'm really feeling off. You don't have time to really get into the core beliefs. You might be able to visit a couple of them, but you want to be mindful of not opening up a can of worms, for lack of a better way to describe it, right? So, always having the goal of the client in mind. What do they want to achieve? And so, the tendency for me as a psychotherapist is I can see some of these things that I could do with the client, but is that really going to be helpful? Do they really need to explore, some of the deeper stuff? So,
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting because you're a therapist and a coach. And we did a talk a while back about the difference between coaching and therapy, which is I thought really fun and really showed the difference between the two. We won't have to
yeah,
hash that out today, but
yeah,
it's pretty interesting that um, because I think what you're talking about too with the psychotherapy is you're trying to like something happened or there's a belief that happened in the past that you're trying to really get at to help them right now make better choices when they need to
mm,
perform at that race in that
yeah,
example. Or it could be like that kind of like future envisioning or additive type of thing where you're trying to get them in the most like positive performant mindset to have
mhm,
them perform. So I was just curious, like, when it comes to like self-talk, and we maybe make that a little bit more neutral. Are there
yeah.
things that really help performance in like just developing a more positive mindset? If we're gonna keep in mind where we want to end up, where are we trying to get with that positive self-talk, positive mindset, and then
Hmm.
in essence, positive beliefs.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
start with mindsets and that first, maybe.
So if you want to think about kind of like the mind or thinking, like a muscle. So the more that you repeat something, the better you get at it, right?
Yeah.
Be it good or bad. So with athletes I work with, and even with my therapy clients, also I do a simple exercise, which is I have them start the day with three things that they're grateful for.
Mm.
And I do this every morning also. I get a cheap little notebook. The night before, I write the next day's date. I write one, two, three, and I write down three things I'm grateful for.
Mm.
As simple, as basic as that is, it starts rewiring the brain to start looking for more positive things and not obsessing so much about the negative things. So if you can, typically people are thinking negatively like right in the morning. Most people are a little bit grumpy. Maybe they haven't had their coffee yet, and they're thinking, "Oh, I got this problem today. I got this problem today." So if you can start the day with kind of like a positive mental coffee, if you will, right? We're writing down gratitude. It at first it's kind of weird. Like at least when I first started doing this, what, 4 years ago now, it felt almost kind of phony. Like this is silly. Of course, I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for my health, etc. But when you start doing it for a couple weeks, you really notice something start to shift. And what you
Mhm.
really notice is if you skip it for a couple days after doing it for a while, you go, God, my mood is off. Like, oh, that's right. I haven't been doing my morning gratitude. Another thing you can do is double down on it and then also write three things that you appreciate about yourself,
Mm.
three things about you that you're proud of, which we're not really encouraged to do that. We're encouraged to be humble, like, oh, yeah, it was nothing, right? So this is kind of like your own personal brag to yourself. Um, and you start the day like that, and it really builds those positive mental muscles, right? So that even you can catch yourself maybe falling into negativity. And if you've been doing your gratitude journaling for a couple months, they say it takes 2 months to start a new habit, make it automatic. Um, if you can start to use some of that positive mental muscle to catch yourself falling into negativity and remind yourself of gratitude and what you appreciate about yourself. So
Awesome. I love that. And I think to add on to it, something that I heard and want to highlight is, when you mentioned when you were starting this for yourself and how it seemed kind of silly or kind of like, yeah, I know I'm grateful for this.
yeah,
Um, my practice as a coach, I'm always listening for that with folks because it's such a like flippant, not heart, but you're not in your heart when you say
yeah,
something like that. And I think a lot of what those gratitude stuff and personal development and um, the exercise you were talking about, it's all about getting into your heart a bit more to feel the
yeah,
gratitude instead of just check boxing like, oh yeah, I should be grateful that I have a house, that I have a good job or a career that I love, that I have people and friends. Like it's one thing to say it, it's one thing to really connect with it. And I think that's the power of this um,
hmm
technique and habit you're sharing.
yeah.
So it's so important. I'm super stoked that you shared that. So
Yeah, thanks. Well, it makes me think about what you just said, like getting into your heart, right?
mhm,
Um, there is there's a power of getting out of your head and into your heart. It really activates kind of your full being, which can help you in decision making a lot.
mhm,
Can just help ground you. So I'm glad you brought that up. Uh, you can actually even feel it too. So like at least for me, when I do the gratitude, I feel as corny as it may sound, but like some kind of warmth in the heart area.
mhm.
So people believe in chakras and stuff like that. Maybe there's something going on there. But yes, it's a good point to bring up. The brain, the head is a great tool, but the heart is also a great tool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And being someone that I think tended to stay away from emotional anything like growing up, language, or for me, my gratitude practices, like I put my hand on my heart to help feel that warmth. And it seems really corny, and like I'm usually looking around to make sure people aren't around, but like, you know,
Yeah.
it's the things that we do when people aren't watching that can be the most impactful. I'm curious then. Do you have anything else to say on mindsets before we move on to the next general structured
Well,
question?
there's always more to say, Sean, but let's forge ahead. Yeah.
Okay, let's put that horse to rest. Okay. Um, on your journey of studying performance and mental health in athletes, what is maybe a like low moment or dark thing that came up for you as you were learning this, that
Mm,
you learned from? Because I think as much as there's like you know, a bunch of great things that come out of it. The journey is always tough. There's always some type of struggle.
mhm.
And just to honor that real quick? Is there anything that maybe comes to mind?
Well, I mean, aside from just in learning about psychology, getting my master's in psychology, counseling psychology, at the time, it was encouraged that the students do their own therapy.
Yeah.
So I went to a therapist, and so during that time, I was not only you know dealing with grad school stuff, learning that, but also doing some therapy. So that some stuff that gets uncovered. I won't get into details, but
Yeah.
it's like that house cleaning kind of thing. Like, oh, there's that thing. I haven't thought about that in 30 years, right? Um, so again, it's like a can of worms. Do I open up that can of worms or
Hmm.
not? Is it going to be helpful? And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But I opened up a couple of cans with my therapist. He was great, really helped me. So I wouldn't say really dark times, but like challenging and difficult. That stuff that
Hmm.
I wasn't really expecting to deal with, and I had the proper guidance to deal with it, so that was really
Hmm.
helpful. Um, but nothing like really dark or terrible. It was more just like a little bit scary stuff was going on. No,
Yeah.
handled it, but yeah, it was a journey for sure.
Hmm. I'm curious then too. Like, do you think you would have opened those cans, as you called it, by yourself, or did you need that structure of that relationship?
Uh, I think those cans of worms would have manifested themselves in behavior later on in life anyway.
Okay, it would have
Yeah.
leaked out somewhere.
Yeah, I think that they say it's bad to suppress or repress things. Sometimes it's maybe even okay to do that,
Hmm.
right? The thing is like is there something that like a can that needs to be opened that keeps manifesting itself in bad behaviors? That would be the question, right? So to answer your question, I would say that there was enough stuff or house cleaning I needed to do so that things wouldn't manifest in some bad behaviors later on in my life. That's what I believe. I can't really prove that, but that's kind of my feeling.
Okay, right on.
Yeah,
Um, I'm guessing, and maybe this is just another. We'll see where this question goes because it
sure.
came to me. So, like, how do you, if you're someone that's going about in life, or you're an athlete, really trying to get into the game and get to the top of what you do, how do you self-identify that maybe you're dragging around some cans, like tied around your waist and they're banging and
Yeah.
leaking everywhere? And how does someone by themselves maybe raise their hand and say, you know what, I need some sort of coach or some type of therapy or guidance to get to that next level?
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, it comes down often to an athlete being in, I'll call it like a performance crisis.
Okay.
We saw this kind of recently in the Olympics
Mm.
with let's see, Naomi Osaka, the tennis player, Simone Biles, the gymnast,
Hmm.
where they were like literally paralyzed, kind of had to drop out. So sometimes it will be that sort of performance crisis where an athlete finds themselves in a slump and they're like, I need to do something because I got no answers here. I
Hmm.
don't know what's going on. There may have been red flags or indications before that, but athletes are really good at toughing it out and sometimes being in denial. I'm
Hmm.
fine. I got this, right? Another athlete comes to mind, Kevin Love of the Cleveland Cavaliers basketball, had a panic attack on the court in the
Oh
middle of
wow.
a game and had to leave and go to the locker room. So that was how he got help. So oftentimes it can be that moment where it's like, all right, like big drama. But hopefully, with more education and normalization of mental health, that athletes can get help sooner.
Hmm.
They realize like, God, my anxiety level is really way too high here. Maybe I should be proactive and check it out. Um, so hopefully that will start happening more.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Like having those types of indicators where I mean those seem like almost really obvious.
Hmm.
So I'm curious maybe on the other side too, like how does maybe an average cyclist or an average football player, basketball player, who maybe doesn't have a lot of can of worms, then go about it and get invited into this process of
Right,
mental health?
right. Yeah. So it'd be so we've been talking more on the like the mental health side of anxiety, depression. So say if someone in baseline is doing relatively well, but maybe they want to up their performance. They think that they can. They're maybe plateaued out. They're feeling like maybe stale or something like that. Hey, I could be doing better. I've changed my training. I've changed maybe my diet. I got a new coach. I'm still not progressing the way I want. Or maybe I'm doing great and I want to do even better. Right. So we're looking at more of like the everything is basically fine, but an athlete maybe wants more performance. The way in there is, again, more of like the education. There's been this history of like the mental game doesn't really matter in sports, but more and more sports psychologists are being hired full time on professional teams. Like pretty much every major sport has a sports psychologist on staff,
Hmm.
and that's how important that mental aspect is. So I think that the gateway in for a lot of athletes is just the normalization of mental performance, and
Okay.
that some of I mean, the best players in the world in every sport have worked with sports psychologists or some sort of a mental performance coach. So normalizing it, providing more education on it, um, noticing patterns of say a season of an athlete, where typically start off really excited. There'll be some good performance. There might be a little downturn, um, and just looking at like it doesn't have to be that way. You can be performing at a higher level much more frequently. There doesn't need to be those slumps or downturns. You just have to know how to pace yourself, know about positive self talks, and a lot of basic stuff.
Got it. So it sounds like what I'm hearing is like if your results aren't super consistent,
Hmm.
sports psychologist or coach can really help you with that mental game to help you get a little bit more consistent results versus just how you feel in the moment that day, whether maybe the chicken you ate for lunch is now causing you to slow down or whatever.
Yeah,
Okay, that's awesome. And of course education around it all too. Like, I mean,
yeah,
I remember going through sports in high school, and like that was the furthest from anyone's mind, or it might have been used against us in weird ways.
yeah. It would just be nice if in coaching certifications they had a lot more of mental health, psychology that folded into the curriculum. That's getting better, but
Hmm.
it's still a lot of lack of education around that. So I mean, we've been talking about athletes, but we should probably talk about coaches a little bit too. And
Yeah.
depending on the type of sport that you're playing, if you're doing a team sport, especially if you're younger, the coach really is the person who sets the tone.
Hmm.
If it's okay to talk about mental performance,
Yeah.
right? So I think it would be great if coaches, had a lot more of that kind of training that they could impart it onto their athletes. That would be great too.
100%. I mean, this concept is bringing up a memory of in sixth grade. I was on a soccer team, the like district soccer team with some of my
Yeah,
friends, and probably one of the best coaches I ever had was this guy, Coach Herb. And like his whole focus was let's just have fun. We'll focus on the fundamentals and like, oh, you missed that shot, laugh about it, try it again. He was very, very chill, I guess would be a good um, descriptor. And that season we went undefeated. We were the only
nice.
team to go undefeated. Next year we switched coaches. We had a yeller who was always screaming at you, and it was such a like contrast and
Right.
how you I felt during the game, how I thought during the games. I could
Yeah.
notice thinking back like really shifted. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, do you have any really good coaches that you've had that have really helped elevate you outside of you mentioned that therapist? earlier that did help you with some of your
Yeah.
sports.
Yeah, unfortunately, Sean, I never really did, and that's one of my
Oh,
regrets in my career is that I never hired a coach. I had a couple coaches. I went to the Olympic Training Center a couple times in Colorado Springs and had coaches there, but that was more just the coaches that were assigned to
hmm
like a group of cyclists. But I never really had, yeah, I never employed a coach. I had casual kind of coaches here and there, but nobody really that was had a full program for me. I just, I did my own training based on what other people did. So I think the physical part I had dialed pretty good. My training was always good there,
hmm
but it would have been great to have that mental coach um, on the side as well. That's something I didn't have. So that's one of the reasons why I do what I do is that was missing for me. I'd like to provide that for people because I know how much, at least I think it could have helped. Because there's certainly, times of burnout and things like that that I went through that I didn't really have to go through.
Right on. That's
Yeah.
a pretty like I didn't really realize. I just assumed you had coaches, so um,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I wish I would have had more. I had really some of the best, I would say coaching was from a couple of older cyclist kind of mentors that
Okay.
had kind of a natural coaching tendency to them. They weren't actually coaches, but they would say, a couple of things still stick in my mind, like real simple stuff, like, "Hey, you're just as good as that guy. You should do this race." Right? Something simple as that, and like, wow, if he thinks that, right? He's my he's my mentor. Like he's cool. It must be true. Right? It
Yeah.
was just words, but it went a long way. I think that's again getting back to coaches, the power of your words as a coach, especially younger athletes looking up to you. Wow, I mean the responsibility, the impact. Like, please, coaches out there, if you're listening, be aware of that. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And that very little correction. And it
Mhm.
goes back to hitting maybe a identity belief of
Yeah.
you're good enough to show up and do that. Like
Right. Yep.
um, just a little
Yeah.
check, whether it's you believe that or not. But that
Mhm.
reassurance can be such a powerful thing. Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say identity. I mean, that's another great keyword
Mm,
that we could get into if we had more time. But that is huge in sports, in business, in life in general. Is that if, like in that example of say an older mentor cyclist said, "Hey, you're just as good as that guy." It was this it was almost like a false belief. Like I just took it as, oh, well, it must be true because this guy is so great, right? So it was
right.
like kind of an instilled belief
hmm
into me. But that's the power of belief, right?
Yeah.
And the power of identity. Oh, my identity has now shifted because this must be true. Um, yeah, identity is huge. Yeah,
Right on. Um, yeah, we could do a whole hour on just identity, I
right.
think.
Yeah, yeah,
Like thinking
definitely.
about it, what's coming up in my head.
Hmm.
So I'm curious then, you had some really good mentors. Is there anything else maybe you learned from them? And then I was going to ask you about people you've mentored and things that you really stood out for you in that process, because that could also teach us kind of the power of what you do and why you're so connected to it, because it's
Hmm.
all about
Hmm.
relationships.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, mentors are. I think it's something that we need more of, just in general in
hmm
society. There's kind of that's missing a lot. But like a couple of my mentors, aside from this guy who said you're just as good as this guy, you should do this race. There's another person who comes to mind, a guy named Bob Mayansky, who was he did the Olympics in 1988, and he got fourth place. It was like one of the best results in a long time,
Wow.
and he wasn't really my mentor, but I trained with him a lot. And so he was kind of a mentor, and I really respected him. And he didn't really say anything to me verbally, but what I learned from him as a mentor was being able to turn on and turn off a switch when you're competing,
Mm,
where you get into this zone of just hyper focus, um, a real aggressive style of competing, where you're kind of ruthless. And it sounds kind of dark, but it's more of like knowing that it's okay to do that because it's just a game,
right.
right? As long as you're not like hitting someone with a tennis racket or something like that over the head, but more of just like getting, staring down your opponent, getting, in this mindset of like no one can beat me, kind of this Rocky Balboa kind of stuff. Is I think some athletes don't explore that because they're like, oh, I don't want to be a psycho, but
Right.
Bob Leonski taught me through example that you can turn that switch on and then turn it off. So that's something powerful that I learned.
That's yeah, such a really interesting thing. There's a guy that I know that was an NFL safety who talks exactly about that, where he's like friends with everyone. He's a human being. He gets on the field, the switch goes off. His
Hmm.
whole focus is to do his job and do it well, and not really think about "Hey, I'm gonna run and hit this person to
Yeah.
tackle him, but I can't think that I'm gonna hurt them. Like this is part of the
Hmm.
profession, you know. And so, um, yeah, I guess as a follow up to that, is there any other area like in your life, and the context definitely matters with this switch
Mhm.
concept that you've
Yeah.
been able to pull from that, you know? Um,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I use it in my business too. So like, recently I was working on a new website,
mhm,
and I'm really kind of getting into the zone. Like I'm into this writing right now. I'm not going to take a break. Again, not going psycho or anything unhealthy, but just thinking, reading inspirational quotes by, say, Steve Jobs or like Mark Cuban or something like that.
mhm.
Or like Mark Cuban has this quote, something like, "Work as if there was somebody else trying to take your business away 24 hours a day."
Oh,
Right?
wow, yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, if I work that hard, right? Boy. And so you can turn on some of that high octane kind of motivation and drive. And again, so it's very aggressive kind of thing. And if you can use that kind of as like, rocket fuel for short periods of time, you can get a lot done.
Mhm,
And again, knowing that you're not going to be working, through the night, and you know, being somewhat sane about it. But those that kind of intensity, that hyper
mhm.
focused intensity in small doses, can be really useful in a lot of venues for sure.
Right on. So, you know, I'm a high performance coach, and so I have to ask this question. Do you
Yeah.
find that you're able to flip that switch on for a consistent and long term period without doing damage to yourself or relationships?
Uh huh. Yes. Yes. I
Okay.
think. Yeah. If you experiment with it, and the more you do it, and more you're able to turn the switch on and off, and be conscious of the fact that it is just a game. It's not life, right? So like,
Okay.
even with a business, like when it comes down to it, if you fail in business, you're still alive and you still have friends and family, right? And
Hmm.
businesses fail every single day, thousands of them. So knowing that when you're turning that switch on of intensity, that you're still really playing a game, and as long as you're not doing that in your interpersonal relationships, like I'm going to get what I want out of this argument with my wife, and I'm going dark. Like, no, don't do that,
No.
right? Like use it in your sport, or use it in the business or something, and know that it's just a tool, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that I will double underline that sentiment because, yeah, you're right. Like in relationships, not really the best tool. So
right,
use
right.
the hammer for the nail and not the screw.
Mhm.
You know. So as they say. All right. Um, what do you think? Like the top talent or skill looks like in like athlete psychology, mental health, and performance.
Hmm. The top one would definitely be hunger and drive, like fire,
Okay.
right? Just straight out, like you look at all the top athletes, I brought up like Steve Jobs, Mark Cuban. There's that level of obsession
Hmm.
coming from this internal passion or drive. So that's the number one thing. It's the number one thing. I could give you, I think, maybe top three
Sure.
characteristics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So number one is just straight up passion, desire, drive. The second one I would be discipline. So just like work ethic.
Hmm.
All the top business people, all the top athletes, they have a really good discipline structure where they're training or working, and it can be balanced too. Like they're getting enough sleep, being really disciplined about your sleep.
Mm.
That's important too. But
Yeah.
just being able to adhere to discipline and structure is another really key characteristic. You see this especially in top athletes. And then I would say the third thing is resiliency.
Mm. Okay.
So Michael Jordan comes to mind. He got, I think it was his second season playing in the NBA. He got almost a career-ending injury. It might have been his first season, I forget, but he was out like half the season with a knee injury, and he was just driving him nuts because he was very passionate.
Yeah.
And so he was resilient. He said, okay, how can I make the best of this and not get depressed? And so he went into the weight room and like just did a ton of weights. And people weren't really doing that at the time. And he had a great trainer to help him too. But I think resilience is a big one. So it's inevitable in your career, be it business or sports or whatever, that you're going to have a downturn. You're going to have losses. And
Yeah.
how do you handle those losses? That resiliency is what really matters because at the end of the day, there's a lot of athletes, a lot of business people just quitting. It's like, oh, I had this loss, and I can't deal with this, and they just quit. Um,
Mm.
and so, simply not quitting is resiliency, right?
Yeah.
Simply just not quitting, and then the numbers game, you're still going to be there, and you're just going to maybe build more slowly. Um, but yeah, resilience, being able to handle losses in a productive way.
I love that.
Yeah.
Um, so I was wondering then, do you think that these are three things that people can actually create and generate in their lives, or is it something that you're kind of born with? Because
Mm.
some people will say, "I'll never be a Michael Jordan because he is like the best." I'm sure
Yeah.
it's contended now, maybe, but but
Yeah. Yeah. I I think with the first one, so again, it's drive, discipline, and resiliency. Those are top three. Yeah, I kind of I vacillate between like that being an inherent kind of personality, unmutable characteristic, like having that intense drive and passion. And there's certainly people who are like born with that, um, even physiologically. That like you could see that after a couple weeks after birth. They've done studies on personality traits
mm,
with babies. Like I think it was they did like 2,000 babies over like a 20-year stretch or something like that, and they predicted personality traits after a couple weeks just by observation,
wow,
and they were super accurate. So they call it temperament is the word. So
okay,
I would say temperament has a lot to do with it. Upbringing, of course, things like that. I also think that everyone has something inside them that they're really interested in. They don't have to necessarily be passionate about it. Like that's kind of a buzzword. You got to be passionate. It's like, well, maybe not necessarily. Is there just something that you just like, something that
right,
you're interested in? And I think everyone has that. So if you can find that through conversation with a coach, for example, like what is it? One thing I like playing checkers, right?
yep,
Awesome. And you maybe feel like a nerd about it. It's like, no, well, like, great. Tell me about checkers. Oh, I love, the design of the boards and like they get really into it. So that's your thing, right? If you find that thing, then if it's important enough for you, if you're interested, and I won't use passion, I'll use just the word interest. If you're interested enough in it, then you can get the discipline, you can get the resiliency because you're always reminding yourself that what you're doing, what your mission is it's important. So it's got to be important. So I think you can leverage that passion in people to varying degrees. I think also some people are just born with it, and that comes with its own baggage too, because sometimes you can't turn off the flame, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
Okay. Sweet. Um, then I was curious, like, speaking of, did you have any big like influences on the mental health or performance aspect that you look up to or that have informed how you've built your coaching program or help how you focus your psychology practice?
hmm
Um, that if other people were interested in this topic, it's like, oh, you'd have to like read these three people, watch these three people. Like these are really the three
yeah.
people to follow.
hmm Yeah, I would say Michael Gervais comes to mind.
Okay.
He's a sports psychologist. I believe the last name is Gervais, I think. He brings a lot of present moment awareness into sports,
Mm-hmm.
which can be a really powerful tool. It's a lot of athletes have difficulty with it because they want to go, 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 goals, let's move forward. But this is more of just noticing present moment, like what's going on. That can really help you tune into things that are working or not working. So I'd recommend him. Also, Ed Milet. That's Mylett. He's not necessarily a sports guy. Well, he has background in baseball, but he has a lot of great strategies. YouTube channel's great. I mean, there's so many people out there. Brendan Burchard, you're a big fan. I'm a fan as well. Um, Once you start tuning into those people, the YouTube algorithm starts sending other folks your way, right?
Right.
But just, really just positive psychology kind of people who believe in just cultivating the positive mental attitude, positive self talk can go a long way. There's another guy. Check out Impact Theory with Tom Bilyeu.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I got some good nuggets from him. Um, So you can follow me, Michael Ceely. got my own YouTube channel, Instagram, all that good social media stuff. So I synthesize what I've learned over the years and learned from other people as well. So
Awesome. Awesome. Okay.
yeah,
Then kind of just trying to bring it home.
sure.
If someone was a beginner, like starter athlete, um, where would be like the 1 to 3 habits or 3 things to do in order to really improve their mental health or mental performance
Mhm.
game?
Yeah, I think definitely what I was talking about earlier is that morning gratitude exercise
Okay.
is huge. I think just everyone should do that, regardless of what kind of performance you want.
Yeah.
So that would be the starter kit. Would be the morning 3 things you're grateful for, the 3 things you are proud of, appreciate about yourself. That's huge.
Powerful.
Um,
Yeah.
I think having a planner or some sort of a journal or planner, planning ahead, without getting into specifics, but you got to write down your goals,
Hmm.
right? And this is people are always told to do this. They'll do it and they'll forget about them, put them away. Um, so part of the starter kit is having not too many goals, but like maybe one or two. Have it written down and tape it to your wall right in
Right.
front of your computer on your fridge. So you're just looking at it all the time, all the time.
Yeah.
That's huge. Um, then I would also write down a mission statement. So goals are
Nice.
different from a mission statement. Goals are achievements or landmarks, and then when you reach them, you set new goals. A mission statement is something different. It's something that you're always steering toward, your philosophy. And I have one. I have it framed right here in my home office. So I look at it every day, and it's I think that's important too. So for an athlete or a high performer, spend some time coming up with a mission statement,
Hmm.
um, and try to make it succinct, maybe 3 sentences tops. It's why you do what you do, right? So why are you a coach? Why are you an athlete? Why are you a mom? Why are you a business person? Why
Yeah.
are you a plumber, a lawyer? And it has to be some sort of a deeper serving serving other people. Like a plumber, for example, helps people.
Yeah.
Like if you got bad plumbing, you're not liking life, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's it right there is the morning gratitude, um, always having goals that are, simple, not too many, and then having that mission statement. That's basically the starter kit. That will keep your mind on the positive track. And there's a lot of other, self-talk exercises we could talk about, but that's more um, need some more education on how to really do that. But my top three is what I just told you there.
Okay, right on. And following up on that, if you were an established athlete, what would be like the three, like assuming that you're doing the basics, like what
Hmm.
would you if you had to assess an athlete, right? So say I'm a ultimate frisbee champion, which I'm
Yeah.
not, but and I'm like, hey, Michael, I'd really love to up my ultimate frisbee game. Like, what would
Yeah.
you maybe like? What would be your checklist to be like? Do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this?
Hmm.
To help take someone that's experienced to that next level.
Yeah. First I want to ask, is there anything that's not working, that's really bothering you, right? So
Hmm.
but if we're assuming that, nothing's really wrong and you just want to improve your level, right? So I would say I don't necessarily have like a starter kit for that. Um, but I would say the first thing would be trying an experiment where we talked about this earlier, is doing that switch, like that intensity switch, like in your next, Sean, your next ultimate frisbee game. I want you to pretend that you're playing for your own life, or that if you don't, you know, if you don't do well, something really bad is going to happen. So
Okay.
getting into that sort of that really intense space, trying that out, cultivating that would be something to start with. Um, one thing I do also with athletes, without getting too deep on the house cleaning again, is do a life domains assessment, which is like
Okay.
how satisfied are you in all the areas of your life. So, your relationship with your family, your significant other, your sport, um, your hobbies, and you rate them on a 0 to 10 scale. And if one of those is super low, that's going to be a distraction, or like
Mm.
a background stressor that can keep distract your focus. And I would say, well, do you want to take care of that? Maybe work with a therapist, or is there something you need to do there? Because if there's something that's draining your energy and focus, even if you're the most focused compartmentalizing person, like that's going to kind of drift in, right? Um, so that would be one thing there too. But I don't really have, for more advanced athletes, not really like a starter kit. It's more of kind of like just tailored, like personally, where do you want to go? What are your goals? That's the first thing. Like, what do you want to do? What does up your game mean? What do you want to achieve?
I love that. That's essentially what I do as a coach, and I love
Yeah.
the call out to being more holistic.
Mhm.
Sometimes you can get so focused in on the thing that
Right.
you're all about and doing that you are 100% right that if your family life's not great or you're doing your sport and you're not going to work and you're struggling with nutrition because you can't buy, you know, decent food or any food for that matter, that's going to impact your performance. So I really love that. So, okay. Um, then I'm just curious, like, in general, do you have any habits that keep you on purpose or mission every day or week or month?
Hmm. Yeah. Everything that I've prescribed, I do myself. So,
Good.
so I've got my gratitude journal. I could almost reach over and show you. So that has to happen every day for me. I can skip it here and there, but I notice a difference. So, and then I always have goals posted and my mission statement. Those are really the three things right there. That if you know, like when I travel and those are missing, I miss them.
Right.
Miss that structure. Um, well, one thing I've been really better about is having a very strict lights out, screens off time.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
That your success the next day starts the night before.
Yeah.
So it's easy to push the limit and like let me watch some Netflix late or let me work a little extra late. It bites you the next day. So I've been much more disciplined about getting to bed nice and early, getting about 7.5 hours of sleep, which feels great. So um, sleep, gotta have sleep.
Yep, 100%. And I love it. It reminds me too that like, after, this recording, one of my mini breaks is to take a minute or two to just close your eyes because we have
Mhm.
lights behind here, got the screen light.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
if you work in an office, you have overhead light. And so a lot of times just like fatigue and
yep,
exhaustion is just because your eyes are strained. And so that quick
yep,
reset can really change how you feel during the day in a very
yep,
significant and surprising way. Like it always is like, oh, that was so simple, but like
yeah,
so impactful. So
yeah.
okay. So with that, Michael Ceely, thank you so much. I'm very grateful that we're able to do this. Is there anything that you really enjoyed or loved about our talk today? Just to kind of end on that high note. So
Sure. Your positive energy, man. Whenever we talk, I always get fired up. So that's just something that you have. I think that it's a gift that you have, and you're sharing that with people. And I think it's great that you're launching your podcast. It's going to help a lot of people.
oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I have a whole bunch of notes that I'll have to go through. There's so many good nuggets, and it's always I'm always super excited for people when they talk about the things that they're really into and knowledgeable and
Mhm.
passionate about. So
Yeah.
I love that idea of the switch. I'm trying to
Mhm.
think maybe how I can incorporate that a little bit more and experiment with that because my life is one giant experiment for all my
Huh?
personality stuff. Um, so we'll see. I'll let you know how that goes.
Okay.
And yeah, there's so much great stuff that we covered today. Again, I am so just grateful and thankful that you're here. So with that, man, we'll,
Yeah.
we'll talk to you soon. Where can the good people find you? I'll put it below
Yeah.
in the show notes, but you could
Sure.
share it here.
It's pretty simple when you have a last name that's spelled not super commonly. So if you just Google my name, Michael Ceely, you're going to find all my social media stuff, all my websites, everything. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Been doing a lot of stuff on Instagram. Same Michael Ceely Instagram. Been doing a lot of videos there. So
Okay, we'll direct
yeah,
the folks to Instagram. You guys know how to
been
Google. And again, thanks, and we'll see you next time, man. Take care.
a pleasure. Thanks, Sean.
All right, what a great interview with Michael. So, the three takeaways from this episode to help you live a little bit more meaningful stuff that you can apply to your life from our conversation is to do that morning gratitude exercise, the three things that you're grateful for every day or that you're proud about, all that. So, make sure you do that every morning. Write down your goals and create your mission statement. So that's what we learned today. If you would, please help out the podcast by going to Apple Podcasts and subscribing and leaving a comment for the Meaningful Revolution podcast. Help us make this a movement, and I really would love your assistance there. And you can always go to sean.coach, www.shawn.coach, if you want to learn more about my high performance coaching business or about me at all. So the next episode that we have is all about the power of ritual with my good friend Nicole Sugihara. So make sure you check that out. We talk about a lot of really awesome things there. I'm really excited to bring this to you guys. So we'll see you on the next podcast. Take care.